Hello, my name is Isaac Kelman. This is my fourth progress report for Production Studio. So for this project, I spent a lot of time fine-tuning the controls and making them work a lot better. If you look at previous videos I had, the controls, you could see it worked, especially with the thruster. It was able to move and move correctly, but there was weirdness. Sometimes there was weird things where if you're off to the side, it would jump a bit, and the joystick had weird problems where it didn't rotate perfectly. It spun on itself a bunch. And there are a couple other weird bugs with the joystick. So I spent a lot of time in this milestone working out those bugs, and I actually reworked a lot of the way that the thruster system, the thruster and the joystick worked. Originally, what I had them set is that they actually would rotate themselves towards there's a function called rotate towards, and what it does is it essentially creates a rotation that takes one object and points the top of one object towards another object, which in some situations is super useful for cinematics, scenes, and other certain applications, but for this one it was causing a lot of problems, especially because I only wanted to rotate in one or two axes, and it wants to rotate in all three. If you only want to rotate by one, it gives you gimbal lock, or it starts negating values, because if you rotate above your yaw above 180, it wants to invert it and just turn the character around. So to minimize this, I completely scrapped that system, and I use a system that actually makes this a lot easier when I'm setting the values. So instead of before using look at rotation break vector, divide by 90 or whatever, I get the location of each object, subtract them to get the location in real space, get the controller's forward vector, and calculate the dot product of that. And the dot product of the forward vector of the thruster will always be in front or behind it, and then based off that value of the dot product, that's essentially a reverse sine. So, or essentially, the dot product of that is equal to the sine. So if you do arc sine or sine inverse and multiply it by -1 since it's backwards, that will give you your angle of rotation. You use a sine, not a cosine, since you want 0 to be at the top, not at the front or back. And I also multiply it by the scale of the object, so that way, and you multiply it by a fixed value. For this one it's 7. That's the actual size of the 3D model itself. So this way you can scale up and down the model as you need, and it will always work no matter the scale. So let me show you how this works in the scene quickly. If I play this, I can take my motion controller, bring it over here, and set it up correctly, and when you're on top, it will rotate, and it gives you a value between -1 and 1. Well, 1 once I get close enough, I got out of the way, 1 second. And 1, there we go. I grabbed the wrong axis. So there we go. That simple, and this output value allows you to then pass this value to the ship, which is this big white square, and rotate. I currently broke the rotation just to show you that. I did the same thing with the joystick. It's a bit more complicated because you have to do 2 dot products and 2 divisions. There's something I do need to change later, and there's a couple other weird things. Both of them like to kind of freak out when they're attached to the ship and you actually move the ship around. They kind of lock up and seize and get stuck in one spot. I think I know why that is. I'm not entirely sure. I think it's something about scales and other things being kind of off when you're parented to another object, since the one object's scale is transformed, your scale is then transformed in the inverse, so that way your object looks like it's the same scale. So if I were to go over here, but if I go into the ship and I attach the thruster, and move it perfectly correctly, the ship moves. Now it moved very slowly for some reason. I honestly couldn't tell you why. That wasn't my job to fix, but I told them to fix that. It didn't get fixed. That's not the end of the world though. One thing I was debating on changing was, should you leave the thruster, should I do dead zones? So if you're right here at 0.004, you can see the ship is very slightly moving. I don't know if I want to put a dead zone in the controls, so that way you have room for error, and that way you're not unless you put it like dead on evenly, you can like take the thruster off, and otherwise you'll still keep moving. And the other thing, or you just want it when you let go of it, it just springs back to the center, which I don't like that one, but I think someone suggested that, and that might work. I could also do finite values, so it locks to certain, like 100, 90, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, etc. So that way you don't have to worry about that. And the joystick works just as well. So you can see it's losing its mind right there because I drug it a little weird. I'm just going to restart this one because I did that a little off, and since it was moving, it kind of lost its mind. But if I go directly on top of it and move down right now, normally you need to grab the trigger to, like on the VR controller, to actually move stuff, but because I'm not in VR right now, I'm just have it set up so it moves automatically if it's close enough. But when you pull the controller down, it rotates faster. When you pull it up, it moves up faster. And it works perfectly. You can pull down, and then if you pull down and to the right, it rotates. Pull straight and to the right, it just rolls. Pull all the way up in here, and you have... And this one is a bit different than the other ones, because I wanted this one, I figured with the joystick, you didn't want it to... Joysticks have a spring in them, and they always snap back to their original springy position, which is super useful, so that way when you get too far away, it just snaps off, or if you, in-game, if you let go of the trigger, it just snaps back to where it's supposed to go. The other great thing about this is since the way the rotations work, the vectors are forward, so if I go forward right here, well, if I go reverse, if I go forward here, you can see it's moving in the direction that we want it to go, so I can put that there, and leave that going forward. This one's backwards right now for some reason, and then it's still going forward, and then I can change where I have it go. So I'm pulling back up, and then I rotate to the side, and then I push forward, and I go forward. I'm now facing the camera. Alright, there are a couple issues with this. The main issue being with the joystick and the ship, if it's parented to the ship. When the ship moves, the joystick should theoretically move with it, which yes it does, but it doesn't move correctly. I mean, the ship it does, but the joystick itself actually starts to act really strange. This is because some rotations are set wrong. You just saw it freak out right there. So what it's doing is, because the ship is moving down, and if you notice, if I drag the ship up and rotate it, you can see the joystick actually just stays up in the global plane, not the local. So I have to start change some variables to be locally rotated, which is a problem because I have to do a bunch of weird stuff with the ship's with joystick's actual local rotation at the start to get it to point straight up, since it's not set XYZ scale correctly. And there was a couple weird things with this where it would lock up. I think that was due to scale. I haven't entirely fixed it, but I'm getting close to fixing it all the way. So right now we have almost everything together in the same scene. I have the two joysticks set up. We have a ship that Ron will be importing this week, and once we import the ship and I fix the joystick right here, we'll be at a point where you can theoretically sit down in a VR game and fly around in a ship and see it move. So by next week, hopefully, if we get the ship skybox in and the rings beginning to be implemented, we have an actual working game. Alright, I think that's everything. Thanks for watching. Bye.